What can I buy? This video will help you understand what the NDIS considers reasonable and necessary for funding. We'll explain what you can buy, how to assess if an item qualifies, and where to find help if a support isn't approved. Acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we meet. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water, and community, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We would also like to acknowledge people with disability, their families, carers, and supporters, and those individuals that have experienced or are experiencing violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation. About AFTO. The Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, or AFTO, is a peak body that represents 40 different disabled people's organisations across Australia. AFTO is dedicated to advocating for the rights of people with disabilities and providing resources to support their independence, including self-management of NDIS plans. Hi, I'm Cheryl Knight. I'm a disability activist, expert consultant, and sector professional with lived experience of multiple disabilities. This video is part of an AFTO project in partnership with Extra Foundation to provide financial literacy resources for NDIS participants. What you'll learn. In this video, I'll guide you through understanding what you can buy with your NDIS plan, help you to understand what it means by the terms reasonable and necessary, and how to tell if a support meets these criteria. We will also cover the new transitional rules, what to do if something isn't considered reasonable and necessary, and where you can go if you need help. So what is reasonable and necessary? The law says that all supports you purchase using your NDIS funds must be reasonable and necessary. But what does this mean? Reasonable and necessary supports are those that are related to your disability and help you to achieve your goals, increase your independence, and improve your community participation. The NDIS defines these supports based on your individual needs, which means what is considered reasonable and necessary for one person can differ from another. Reasonable and necessary supports must be related to your disability, not include everyday living costs unrelated to your disability support needs, and represent value for money. And how things can change from person to person. Because everyone's situation is unique, a support that is reasonable and necessary for one participant might not be for another. It's important to provide clear evidence to the NDIS about why a particular support is essential for you. For a support to be classed as reasonable and necessary, it needs to meet all of the reasonable and necessary criteria, not just some. And these are the criteria that we talk about. So, the support must be related to your disability. It must help you work towards or meet the goals in your NDIS plan. It must support you to participate socially, economically, or increase your independence. It must represent value for money. Must be likely to work and be helpful. Should not include everyday living costs related to your disability, and must take into account what your family, friends, or your community should provide. Mainstream services and everyday items. Not all services and items are covered by NDIS. Some are considered mainstream services, which are generally provided by other systems like health, education, or housing. So mainstream services include services such as general healthcare, like GP visits or dental care. Then there is education, public transport, and other community services. These are typically not funded by the NDIS. Sometimes something might not be funded by another mainstream service, but it's still not something the NDIS will fund. For example, eyeglasses or a maths tutor. Everyday items such as groceries, rent, and utilities are considered everyday living expenses and are not covered by the NDIS. The NDIS focuses on funding disability-specific supports rather than general living costs. So what are these transitional rules? In October 2024, the Australian government made some changes to the NDIS law. Some of these changes are about how you can use your NDIS funds, and these are called transitional rules. These are temporary changes until the government has had time to meet with people with disability to discuss any good or bad points about the new law and make permanent rules. The transitional rules will be reviewed in 2025. You will need to check that a support meets all of the reasonable and necessary criteria still, but now there are some extra criteria a support has to meet before you can purchase it. So what do the transitional rules mean for you? You now need to be sure that a support is for the disability that you were given access to the NDIS. The NDIS will use the term impairment. New people accessing the NDIS will be told what impairment they have met access for. Existing participants will be told in the future what impairment they have met access for. And this is especially important if you have more than one disability. The NDIS now has a list of supports that cannot be funded, even if they meet all of the reasonable and necessary criteria. And this has been called the no list. And there is another list of supports that can be purchased with NDIS funds. This has been called the yes list. So here is a checklist. So if you can tick off all of these categories when you're looking at a support, that means that you can purchase the support. So the support must be related to the disability that you met access for, must help you work towards or meet the goals in your NDIS plan, must support you to participate socially, economically, or increase your independence, must represent value for money, must be likely to work and be helpful, should not include everyday living costs unrelated to your disability, must take into account what your family, friends, or your community should provide, must take into account what mainstream services are responsible for, is not an everyday item or cost, is not on the no list, and is on the yes list. If you can tick all of those boxes, then yes, you can purchase a support with your NDIS plan. What to do if you need help? The NDIS can be very complicated. At times, even the most confident and knowledgeable participants might need some help with their plan. Luckily, help is out there. Here are a few ways that you can get some help. You can contact the NDIS, and they can help you if you're unsure if you can purchase a support. The information you're given should be specific to you and your plan. You can contact your support team, particularly if you have a support coordinator or plan manager. They can help you to understand if you can purchase a support. Or you can contact a peak body or advocate, seeking support from a peak body for your disability type, or an advocacy service if you're stuck and need more advice. What to do if a support isn't approved? If a support you need isn't considered reasonable and necessary by the NDIS, there are other avenues you can explore. You can look into alternative supports through health department services, community organisations, or exploring loans or payment plans. Or you could look at advocacy and appeals. So you could seek an advocacy service or appeal through the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, AAT, if crucial support is denied. Conclusion. To wrap up, understanding what the NDIS considers reasonable and necessary is key to making the most of your plan. If you need more information, or if you're unsure about a particular support, additional resources are available on the AFDO website. The link will be in the video description. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the other videos in the series.